Welcome to the Brave Way Podcast. I'm your host, Lavelle Miller. As you probably already hear, I apologize for the echo. I'm still moving things in my office the correct way. The other way I've been doing the pod, the audio hasn't been as great, and it requires me to do a lot of moving things around to get what I need to get happening. So just bear with me on this and probably a couple others until I can get everything figured out. But this pod is going to be covering why you shouldn't lie during compensation and pension appointments for the VA. As I will explain in the pod, there are different things that the VA will check for, like range of motion, like does blood work say, do you have something, or just a periodic check to see if your disability has even improved, right? And so I will get into all that and explain it to you. Remember, you can like, comment, subscribe. You can contact me on social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at 37 Mode, and I'll be happy to answer any Veterans Affairs related questions for you. As I say that, I'm not a representative of the Department of Veteran Affairs. I do not work for a organization that tends to help veterans. This is just stuff that I have gathered over years of reading and learning about this process to help me, help my other friends, and other people that I interact with that are veterans. So, hope you enjoy the pod. So, like I said in the intro, this podcast will be covering why it's important not to lie during compensation and pension appointments, or CNP as it'll be referred to further, and things that they may or may not check during an actual visit. Now, if you are new to the pod, I did a podcast covering compensation and pension and the 38 CFR, which are full with tons of good information that I'd advise you to check out as well, even probably prior to listening to this, right? So, as we roll on here, when you go to a CNP appointment, there are things that obviously you'll have to be asked, which is why I referred to the other podcast earlier, and everything they will ask you will be based off of information from the 38 CFR, or sometimes I'll have you to just elaborate a little bit further. The idea is everything is supposed to be in favor of the veterans. Just give you that quick tidbit there. When you are filing, there are things that they will not have to check for if there is reasonable belief that you had these things happen to you, right? For example, if you deployed and you received a cab, they will, and you claimed PTSD due to the event that you experienced, there's more than likely not going to be any proof or any elaboration on you having this, or if you had anxiety or you received depression due to whatever. They can just look at the fact that, oh, you received a cab. That means that we don't want to pry any further in this to cause any more issues. You have it. If you're a Purple Heart recipient, you receive any other medals, things like that, right? These are things that they will not have to necessarily confirm that you have these certain disabilities, right? Of course, as well, like if you were injured during these events and obviously still didn't receive a Purple Heart, even if you were injured during these events, right? You've had could have surgeries or anything else preparing you for that, right? Or in a case where myself was a military police officer and other people who do like infantry or forward observers, things like that, right? Where you're probably around a lot of loud noise. And I didn't even file for this whenever I first got disability claims, they just automatically gave me bilateral tendonitis, which is ringing of the ears or ringing in the ears, right? So things like that, they don't even have to worry about you giving them documented proof of, because the belief is you probably have had it, will have it, or experience it at one point in time in your time of service. But things that they will have to try to verify, right, with x-rays and MRIs, it's like if you were saying that you have ligament damage, if you're saying that you have arthritis, things like that. These are things that x-rays, obviously, and MRIs can prove that you actually do have them, right? If you are claiming there's something that they discovered while you was in service or probably happened to your time of service that requires blood work, they will have to run a blood panel to see if you have had these things, right? All of this to say this, right? When you go to a CMP appointment and you are claiming something that is regarding your joints, like I said, you say you have arthritis, you have issues moving it, blah, 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 this, that, and the third, what they end up doing is range of motion testings, right? So they will ask you the general questions like, do you have pain? How often do you have the pain? And what does it limit you to do? Does it require you to sit down? Is it something that's weird enough to where you have to stand because sitting hurts so much? Blah, 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 blah. These are, like I said, just different tidbits of things that they're going to ask you for. But they will do, like I mentioned, range of motion testing. So what is range of motion testing, right? So in the 38 CFR, just covering this briefly, depending on what the joint is, there is a reasonable range of motion it expects your joint to be able to do. And the terms skip me right now, but it's like hyperextension, and there's another one, and I forgot the name of that term, but I'm sure you guys can figure out, look it up. It's like when joints move certain ways, right? It's not able to do that, or it's permanently stays a certain way. So if you're thinking about saying, okay, well, how would I lie? Well, you couldn't lie. Like, so by that is, let's say on average, right, when I have went and they've range of motion tested me, each person has did it 3 times. Why is that, right? They do it 3 times to get an accurate measurement, or as close as they can get, of your actual limits on moving. Because think about this, right? If I fake the funk moving a direction once and they just write it down, okay, that's cool. They'll have it, right? Now, they can't tell you what your degrees are of your movement, right? They just got to write it down. But they're also submitting all this information to the VA. So what the VA will do, once they get this information, is look at it as, okay, what is the average person's range of motion? What was your range of motion if this was your second time or third or fourth or whatever? Or if it's your first time, it's just a benchmark. But let's say later on in life, you decide to go get second or third time, right? You're never going to remember how far you bent. Why? Because you don't even know the degree that they wrote down for you that you moved. So if you are lying, faking the funk about your actual ability on how far you can move one way or the other, and then you go get tested again, they can be like, hey, wait, this guy was only able to move like 10 degrees, using that for example. Now he can move 30, but he's claiming he needs an increase. Then this is what makes him go back and reevaluate everything, right? So as another sidebar, all the disabilities that you have are not considered permanent and total. What does that mean? That means that your disability has been labeled permanent, and they will never And for the most part, when they give you total, that should be the highest rating that you receive for your disability. And now, mind you, or that specific disability. Now, mind you, I do not work for the VA, and a lot of this stuff is stuff that I have gathered over years of trying to research it myself. So there could be some nuances I'm missing there. However, there have been quite a few people that I have helped and have also have other vets that they serve with that they found out the same thing that I'm saying now is they lied during their range of motion test, and the next time they did it, it actually improved. And since it improved, it ended up causing them to outright lose that disability claim in the first place because they would think they were lying. Even to the point of where charges were filed where these people had to pay back disability to the VA because they found out that they actually lied about everything that transpired. I do not want to see that happen to any of these people who are listening that are vets or trying to figure it out. So what is my suggestion to you, right? It's a long-winded way of saying this. Give it your best shot when you're going in each and every time, right? Now, because there could be a situation to where you have lost weight or gained weight, and that also can move us some a little bit, right? But always give your best effort whenever you're doing these range of motion tests so they can go ahead and verify that while we're still on joints right now, that is actually what is going on, and that's the actual problem that they need to look at to get fixed, right? So that's just joints. So when it comes to other things that require blood work or things like that, there's a big thing that people are doing, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't believe in lying, where people know if you claim a certain thing based off of some type of trauma that you had experienced during your time of service, it is an automatic disability rating of a certain thing, right? And so that is a thing that is typically considered permanent and total, and they just need one more thing and then they'll get 100%. However, imagine if, like I said about lying, how it gets caught up. If you say you have certain disabilities that are like that and they give it to you that is a non-tested disability, then when you go back for something, it could be years later and you actually have to have something that's related to that and you're not even paying attention to it, they are already going to tell you that you have a rating for that disability. Now, everybody doesn't check what their ratings are all the time or even see what they filed, right? Because some things you have filed are considered disabilities, and then others are, I'm sorry, not disabilities. Some are service connected, some are not service connected, right? A non service connected disability would be something that they believe you gained while you prior to you joining the service, but as long as the service didn't overly aggravated that injury for you, then they will mark it as a non-service connected disability. Or there are things that happen to you later in life that may have been because of one of your disabilities that they decide to say it's not service connected, but they want to give you a percentage on it just in case something happens later and you need to have some type of medical intervention, right? That is something that has happened to people as well too. It's like I'm saying, is you forget what you've claimed. You forget, especially if you're doing this lying bit, you forget what you've claimed, if I can talk, and you haven't did your due diligence to make sure you've been keeping up with it, because why would you? And you go claim it later, and then you have to pay it back. There's a story, I will say really shortly. There's a person, and I believe you could look this up. He was a soldier that deployed to Iraq, if I'm correct. Um, was dishonorably got dishonorably discharged, and he's in Fort Leavenworth, right? However, he claimed, well, as a process, right? As you get your charges on you, you can always file to get your charge uplifted, right? From dishonorable, get it all the way to general, or other than honorable. Well, whatever it is you have to do. And so he did his good deeds, if you want to call them that, whatever. And so he was able to claim disability. Well, what he did was, because he was a person that had nothing much on his time, and he was well read, or decided to become well read, he read a book over somebody who had a tragic thing happen to them. And so he filed for a VA disability claiming this, and he literally wrote a chapter from, or close to a chapter from this individual's book about what happened to him, submitted it to the VA, and they gave him 100% disability permanent total. He drew disability for, I think, close to 10 years until it was realized by him trying to get, not paying attention that the amount of money he was getting was already the max amount. It was already permanent in total. By him trying to get an increase, he filed some other stuff. The person who received it was like, I think I just read this. And they found the book, found out it was a different guy, found out that they both obviously were in Iraq, if I got the country right. They both were in Iraq at different times, different MOSs. So essentially what they believed, they would have never experienced the same thing based simply off of the job and the description the guy made. The guy was already in Fort Leavenworth, but he ended up having to back pay. I think it was easily over $100,000 back to them, and I mean he's already in Leavenworth, and then they added some years, but I don't think he was getting out anytime soon on that anyway. So I'm sure now they essentially threw him under Leavenworth, right? And so that's something to be cognizant of too. There's a lot of people who are willing to say, hey man, you want 100%, let me tell you how to do it, right? Don't do that. Get what is owed to you based off of things that have happened to you, things that you've actually experienced. And if the increase is warranted, then get the increase. But do not put yourself in a situation to where you are having to remember a story you told years ago and remember your actual range of motion movements that you did prior, or like I said, you just forgot that you made a claim on something prior, and then you try to make a claim on it like it's brand new, and then you're like, oh snap, I've already did this before, which are things that, like I said, can bring up a lot of red flags. That's all for me on this pod. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out more things within the coming weeks. That's going to focus more on veteran services or things to help veterans out. This is a big one, I do believe, because not everybody wants 100%. I would say people want to get what is owed to them. But there are a lot of people out there that are filing for things that can get them caught up and can impact not only their life, but the lives of their family members if they find out what they said isn't true. And actually, let me revert this back, right? So, when I was telling you all about permanent and total, right? When you have a disability that's permanent and total, and I forgot to mention this, that means that the VA will never ask about that disability again, right? So, I have arthritis, right? Just using that for an example. My arthritis is permanent. So they will never check again to see if I have arthritis. I also suffer from migraines. Based off of the definition from the Social Security disabilities, which is where the VA plans on most of this stuff is, migraines, even though they're diagnosed, right, are not considered at this point in time to be a permanent disability, that you will suffer migraines and then eventually they will go away. Because of that, I had my first random check 7 years after I had already received my percentage for my migraines, right? To see how they were, how's it doing, and all this other stuff. If now, mind you, you can go ahead and look on va.gov or eBenefits, and you can see what disabilities that you have are considered permanent that will never change. However, you can also see the ones that are not considered permanent, which means that if you cannot prove that they are at the sustained level, or they have, even if they've decreased some, they will remove or change your percentage for your disability based on that. So some of these ideas, right, that run in the minds of a lot of these people on how to scheme the system, they may not know, or they may have not checked to see if their disabilities are labeled as permanent, which means, like I said, it could be 7 years, it could be 15 years, it could be whatever, and they can go ahead and try to check to see if that disability is permanent. You have to always keep that in mind, since medicine is always changing, best practices are always changing. Something that somebody could have told you today to hornswoggle the VA, they could have a test for it to find out that that's not true. So keep all that in mind, and I will close it out with that. This is how you become legendary and greatness is earned.